Hey y'all, it's your girl Liana here, coming at you with one hell of a wild story. This one's gonna have you clutching your pearls, I'm telling you. It involves my crazy ex-mother-in-law pulling some seriously unhinged antics. To give you all some context, I'm a 29-year-old journalist living my best life out in New York City nowadays. But this all goes back to when I was still stuck in my crappy hometown in Texas, married to my cheating ex, Tommy. Tommy and I had been high school sweethearts and all that mushy-gushy crap at first, but boy, oh boy, did that fairy tale romance turn rotten real quick once we tied the knot. The dude completely did a 180 from the sweet, charming guy I fell for back in the day. Turned out, my dear husband was a gaslighting, manipulative snake who thought he could just walk all over me like a doormat. The emotional abuse started getting bad just months into our marriage. He'd berate me constantly, talk down to me like I was stupid, and make me doubt my own reality. And that's not even getting into the times he'd get physical too, when his temper would flare up over the smallest things. I'm talking holes punched into walls, objects being thrown, that kind of scary stuff. But foolish young me just thought maybe I could fix him or something if I was patient and understanding enough, you know. Well, let me tell you, that was a harsh life lesson learned. Because even after I stuck by his side through all that toxic BS for 3 long years, I eventually learned the ultimate betrayal. My lovely hubby had gone and gotten his side chick pregnant behind my back. That was the final nail in the coffin for me. I knew right then and there that there was no way I could ever look at Tommy the same again after that kind of disrespect and deception. So despite his desperate pleas and promises to change, I went full steam ahead with filing those divorce papers. Now, you'd think with me being the one who got so terribly mistreated throughout our marriage that I'd be in the clear from harassment once I dumped his unfaithful behind, right? Ha! Oh, if only it were that simple. No, instead my troubles were just beginning. Because, as it turned out, Tommy and his Looney Tunes mother, Lou, were some next-level psychos who simply couldn't accept me walking away with my freedom and self-worth intact. I'll never forget that haunting phone call from Lou the day after my divorce was finalized. I had felt so liberated, like a huge weight got lifted off my shoulders, and I could finally start healing. But Lou's shrill, screeching voice came through to rain on my parade. Liana, how could you do this to us? You're running my poor Tommykins' life just because you're some selfish little brat who couldn't appreciate what a good man he was. He did everything for you, and this is how you repay him? I just rolled my eyes, feeling that sense of dread creep back in. Lou, I don't have time for this right now. Oh, no, you don't get to dismiss me, you ungrateful wench. You're going to pay for what you did to my son. Did you even stop to think about how your greed is affecting him financially now that he has to pay your ridiculous alimony fees? Greed? I wanted to laugh, as if me finally putting an end to the vicious cycle of abuse was me just being greedy. But hearing her spew all that toxic nonsense only reaffirmed I had made the right call. Needless to say, that was just the start of Lou's relentless harassment and stalking efforts. No matter how many times I switched numbers, that crazy woman would somehow find a way to track me down so she could bombard me with strings of hateful texts and voicemails all over again. You'll never be happy, you evil shrew. Her voice would screech through the speaker. You won't be able to hide from Tommy forever. He's going to take you back whether you like it or not, you dumb tramp. Yeah, real high-class lady there, huh? Still, sad as it was, I expected nothing less from my twisted ex-mother-in-law. She was always Lou, not Lulu to me. Just a bitter old miserable hag desperately clinging to the twisted idea that her precious baby boy could do no wrong. So for the sake of my own healing, I made the wise choice to go full no contact with both Tommy and his whack job mom. I blocked their numbers, blocked them on all socials, the whole 9 yards. Looking back, it was easily one of the best decisions I ever made for my mental health. Of course, that didn't stop Lou from finding new ways to harass me every now and then. She would make weird prank calls, send nasty emails, and even reach out to some of my friends trying to turn them against me. At a certain point, it got so over the top that I actually had to get the cops involved to declare her behavior as harassment. But of course, they didn't do much. They just saw her as this innocent but senile lady who could do no harm. But that wasn't true. Every text, every call, every comment was a reminder of the hell I went through for those 3 years. After some time, though, things finally seemed to settle down for a little while. I ended up landing an awesome journalism gig out in the Big Apple where I could really dive headfirst into focusing on my dreams and healing from those traumatic past relationships. Life was honestly going so amazingly well. I had a fab new career trajectory, amazing friends who became my chosen family, and was truly coming into my own in ways I never thought possible during my dark years of abuse. Until one fateful day when I got a call that rocked my world. My Uncle Lenny, who I was super close with while growing up, had passed away back home in my small Texas town. Uncle Lenny was genuinely one of the sweetest, most caring souls you could ever hope to meet. Despite being just a simple school teacher, he devoted so much of his spare time to volunteering at children's hospitals, homeless shelters, you name it. He was the kind of selfless guy who would give you the shirt off his back without hesitation. So it absolutely shattered my heart to learn he was gone, and knowing I wouldn't get a proper chance to say my final goodbyes. I hadn't physically been back to our hometown in ages due to the lingering trauma of my divorce. But there was no question in my mind that I had to return to be with my folks and the rest of my grieving family for his funeral after such a devastating loss. I hopped on the first flight out to Texas, already an emotional wreck. Saying goodbye to that sweet man was going to be one of the hardest things I ever had to do. What made it even harder was knowing what else awaited me back in that godforsaken small town. The possibility of running into those toxic leeches, Lou and Tommy. See, Lou was never just my ex-mother-in-law. She had grown up and spent her whole life in the same area, so running into her out in public was pretty much inevitable, since our families had deep roots there. And of course, wherever Lou's wretched presence festered, Tommy was never too far behind like a whipped puppy. Still, I tried to put my fears and apprehensions aside for Uncle Lenny's sake. When my Uber pulled up to my childhood home, I just focused on reuniting with my folks and honoring this beautiful memory. And that's what really mattered most. As I got out of the car, the first thing I noticed was my old friend and former city council member, Lester's truck parked in the driveway. Of course, he would be here. I thought with a sad smile. Uncle Lenny had done so much volunteering and charity work over the years that he inevitably became super tight with all the local politicians and community leaders. Lester was probably one of his closest friends. I felt a comforting warmth knowing someone like him would be here for my family during this heavy time. Uncle Lenny's passing had been a huge loss for the whole town, not just my relatives, so I took a deep breath, walked up that all too familiar long driveway, and headed inside, bracing myself for lots of hugs, tears, and difficult goodbyes over the next few days. My parents were an absolute wreck as expected. We spent the first several hours just drinking tea and swapping old stories and anecdotes about Lenny back when we were kids. I couldn't contain my own waterworks either, as more and more heartwarming memories came rushing back of what an amazing uncle and human being he had been in life. Lester himself was there pretty much from the moment I arrived until well into the evening, too. He was a total rock for all of us through the grieving process, offering so much compassion and even laughing along whenever we'd fondly recall Lenny's incredible sense of humor, too. A really great man. As evening fell, Lester eventually had to head out, despite all of us wishing he could stay longer. We would miss that comforting presence over the next few days as we prepared for the upcoming funeral service. Just when I thought the night's poignant grieving session was winding down, though, I got a notification on my phone that made my blood run cold. It was from an unknown number, but I knew exactly who was behind it. That deranged hag, Lou. Sure enough, when I opened up the message, there was a picture of a smashed-up car with its windows busted out sitting in my mom and dad's driveway. The text above simply read, "That's what you get for divorcing my son." A chill ran down my spine as I quickly realized this was just the latest vile move in Lou's twisted harassment campaign against me. Despite trying to start a new life far away from their toxicity, that psycho was still dead set on tormenting me for daring to escape her precious son's abuse. Of course, she'd known that I would be home. She was probably stalking the area all day. "For real?" I muttered under my breath. This woman was really going to threaten me even while our family was in mourning? Talk about a new low. In a sudden flash of anger, I tried to call the number back, but it went straight to voicemail. Figured that a deranged woman would set up a burner just to get my hopes up before disappearing again. I felt a surge of adrenaline as the realization hit that Lou had followed through on her twisted threat after all. "Everyone, we need to go outside right now," I yelled, causing my parents and Lester to jump in surprise. Not waiting for a response, I bolted towards the front door and flung it open, the others following closely behind me, asking me what the matter was. And there it was. Lester's truck sitting in the driveway, just as decrepit and destroyed as the photo Lou had sent me depicted. The windows were entirely shattered into a million pieces, littering the driveway. Long gashes were carved deep into the door panels, warping the metal frames. One of the tires had been slashed open too, leaving it completely deflated and bent at an unnatural angle. "Oh my God," I heard my mom gasp behind me in horror. Lester, on the other hand, said nothing. His entire body seemed frozen in a state of utter disbelief and fury. Taking a deep breath to steel my nerves, I turned to face them and show them the message. "Who is this?" "It was my ex-mother-in-law, Lou. This is her doing." Lester's eyes widened as realization crashed over him too. "The woman you told me had been harassing you for years, since your divorce?" I could only nod solemnly, feeling my face burn red hot with shame and guilt. This poor man had always been there for me, and now he was here with our grieving family out of the goodness of his heart during our time of mourning. And now his generosity had been violently repaid with Lou's blind vengeance simply because I was the target. As Lester stormed down to inspect the damage up close, running his hands over the jagged scratches and dents, my dad pulled me aside with clear concern. "Honey, are you telling me this awful woman has been terrorizing you like this? Even now, after all these years?" Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back defiantly. I wasn't going to let Lou reduce me to a sniveling mess anymore. Not after all the hard work I'd done at reclaiming my sense of self-worth. Unfortunately, yes, she's become totally unhinged ever since the divorce. Somehow, she tracked me down being back in town and is taking her resentment out on us. A big part of me regrets coming back here now and putting you all at risk from her toxic obsession. Don't you dare say that, my father stated firmly, wrapping me up in a tight embrace. We're your family. We'll get through this together like we always have before. I felt a tear roll down my cheek as I melted into his comforting hug. God, how I'd missed this unbridled parental love and support during all these couple of years living alone in the big city. No matter how independent I prided myself on being, I would always need these roots to stay grounded. The tender moment was shattered, however, by Lester's enraged bellow from over by the driveway. Unfreaking believable! Someone clearly has a death wish targeting me like this, he snarled, slamming his fist down against what remained of his truck bed. Taking a deep breath to regain my composure, I headed over to try and de-escalate the situation before the kind old man did something rash. Lester, I'm so sorry you got dragged into the crossfire like this. I never imagined Lou would go so far as to take her vendetta out on you too. He leveled me with an intense glare, the raw fury and hurt still radiating from those eyes. So help me understand then, just what kind of a person are we dealing with here? Do I need to be watching over my shoulder everywhere I go now in case she's got more unpleasant surprises in store? No. Despite her clear lack of boundaries, Lou isn't the kind of unhinged lunatic who would physically threaten or stalk anyone. She much prefers fighting her petty wars from the shadows through sabotage like this. The real scary part is just how deranged her vendetta against me has gotten. If she's willing to turn it towards destroying the property of total strangers now too. Lester seemed to consider my assessment for a few moments before squaring his shoulders with a resolute nod. In that case, I believe it's time we return the favor and fight back through more official channels then. Despite the direness of the situation, I felt a glimmer of hope stir in my chest. You're going to take legal action against her? You're damn right I am. Harassment, property destruction, everything. And as one of the longest tenured council members in town, you can bet you're behind. I've got plenty of connections to make this an open and shut case too. Scribbling down Lou's full name and home address on a little notepad, I passed the details along to Lester. If anyone can finally put that toxic old woman in her place, it's someone like you who's respected in this community. Please take her for everything you can. His expression softened slightly as he accepted the notepad. You've been through more than enough trauma at her hands, Liana. From here on out, consider this a personal mission to make sure she never bothers you or your loved ones ever again. Relief washed over me, finally having such a powerful ally in my corner against Lou's torment. With Lester now hell-bent on holding her fully accountable, perhaps I would finally break free from that cycle of abuse once and for all. Unfortunately, that brief glimmer of hope was predictably short-lived, because just a few hours later, after Lester had departed for the evening, my phone rang with a call from Lou's newest burner number. Did your little boyfriend really think I wouldn't find out about his pathetic intimidation tactics? I rolled my eyes at her feeble attempts to get under my skin. You reap what you sow, Lou. Maybe think twice before destroying other people's property next time, if you can't handle the heat. Other people? I thought it was your car. As usual, that's where you're mistaken. You didn't destroy my car. You destroyed our guest's car. But as usual, you're too dense and hell-bent on petty revenge to understand that your actions have consequences. Oh, cut the righteous act, you smug little brat. This is exactly why everybody hates your guts. You always have to play the innocent victim card while ruining everything for people who do you no wrong. Resisting the urge to laugh out loud at her warped persecution complex, I replied coolly, I'm sorry. Did you conveniently forget the little stunt you just pulled vandalizing Lester's truck because of your unhinged tantrum? That man has never done a single thing to you, yet you still lashed out because of your petty grievances with me. Wait, what did you say? What? Who does the car belong to? That's when I couldn't hold it in any longer. She heard me right the first time, and I'm pretty sure she was looking ghostly pale on the other end of the line. That was Uncle Lester's car. You know, the old city council member? Lou seemed to be sputtering for a retort, so I pressed on with renewed strength, knowing that she was losing this battle. Well, you didn't say anything. I didn't know it was his car. I didn't know. This is all your fault. You see, you ruin everything. Why didn't you warn me? I'm sorry? Why didn't you say anything? Ma'am, I think you need to get some professional help. How in God's name was I supposed to know that you were planning on vandalizing my property? And even if I somehow knew and was stupid enough to say, swipe or no swiping, to a deranged idiot like you, would you have even listened to me? Oh, God, I'm going to be ruined. What did he tell you? Is he going to sue? Tell me now. I felt a sudden pang of pity for this deranged, hateful woman, still so blinded by her own biases that she truly believed the insane bile pouring from her lips. How sad and small her miserable existence must be, if tormenting me was all she had left to cling to. I laughed again, a hearty belly laugh. It was quite bitter, actually, considering the circumstances. Your fragile ego is too far gone to comprehend reality at this point. There was a strange silence on the other end as Lou seemed to be hyperventilating, trying to process the brutal truths I had just laid bare. For once in her miserable life, that wretched woman was at a total loss for snide remarks or hurtful barbs to fling back in her defense. Lou? I prodded, unable to resist a small smirk from creeping across my face. What's the matter? Cat finally got your tongue after all these years? More tense silence, aside from the unthinkable ragged breathing patterns of someone teetering on the verge of a panic attack. A small part of me felt a pang of vicious satisfaction, knowing I had rendered the great Lou temporarily speechless simply by speaking my own truth out loud. Finally, in a small, quavering voice I had never heard from her before. Liana, please, you have to listen to me. This has all gone too far. I can admit that now, but you don't understand the full story here. My eye rolls intensified at her pathetic attempts to do damage control. Save it, Lou. I gave Lester all the details about your harassment and deranged vendetta against me. He has everything he needs now to make sure you face full accountability. No, she gasped, the panic audible in her voice now. Liana, you don't know what you're doing. Think about poor Tommy. He'll be ruined if I face charges. I'll be ruined. We'll lose everything, all because of your stubborn pride. A derisive snort escaped my lips before I could stop it. Wow, Lou, you really are delusional to the very end, aren't you? Resorting to pleading about your loser son's well-being as a final, desperate gambit for sympathy. How sad. What? This has nothing to do with him. I'm talking about our family assets, our home, my finances. Lester is going to take it all from me, don't you understand? That was an expensive car. I can't afford to pay for those damages. I couldn't resist letting out a mocking chuckle at the sheer hypocrisy and entitlement dripping from her words. Oh, boo-hoo, the big bad Lou might finally face actual consequences for her vile actions and have to pay up. What a shame. Maybe you should have thought about that before harassing me relentlessly for years and vandalizing an innocent man's vehicle just for your giggles. This is the bed you've made, Lou. Now you're just going to have to lie in it for once. Liana, please, I'm begging you, have mercy. Think of the guilt and shame your own parents will have to endure if I face jail time over these ridiculous allegations. That desperate plea is what finally broke the dam inside me, causing me to erupt with uncontrollable laughter. Here was this vile, toxic woman who had tormented me for years under the delusion that I was some heartless parasite. Yet in her final hour of desperation, she couldn't resist trying to emotionally manipulate me one last time by invoking parental shame. Oh, Lou, if there's any guilt or shame to be felt here, it's entirely yours for constantly deluding yourself about who the actual villain has been this whole time. And as for my parents, honey, they'll be front and center at your court hearing, smiling and taking pictures like you're a tourist attraction. They will not feel bad one bit. None of us will. I'm pretty sure your good-for-nothing son will also crack a smile or two once hearing about this. Her choked sobs were the only response on the other end of the line. This is your karma finally coming back around to deliver a wake-up call. Be thankful Lester is only pursuing financial restitution and a restraining order to protect my family. Because after all the emotional and physical turmoil your son inflicted on me, you should consider yourself lucky if you can avoid jail time. The sharp intake of breath on the other end let me know those last words landed with full force. As satisfying as it was to finally shatter Lou's delusional world view, she clearly hadn't expected to hear such brutal honesty from me at last. Before she could muster up a response, I swiftly ended the call with a definitive "Goodbye, Lou," and blocked her number immediately after. I had said my final piece. There was nothing left to gain from entertaining her craveness any longer. In the coming weeks that followed Uncle Lenny's sorrowful funeral proceedings, Lester did indeed uphold his promise to pursue full legal restitution. He provided regular updates on the impending lawsuit, including how Lou's hysterical claims of being destitute were quickly disproven once her actual assets and financial portfolio were audited. Once it became clear this wasn't just an empty threat, Lou's sniveling attempts to backtrack and avoid culpability reached outrageous new lows. But Lester stood firm, securing a comprehensive restraining order against her in addition to the costly financial penalties. By the time I had returned to my life in New York City, Lou had been officially barred from any contact with me, my family, or Lester moving forward. One stern letter from his high-powered legal team was enough to ensure she remained in compliance too. The only communication I ever received from that wretched family again was the scheduled monthly payments of Tommy's court-mandated alimony hitting my bank account like clockwork. I couldn't help but let out a wry chuckle whenever those notifications came through, a bittersweet reminder that real karma was finally being served. While I would never truly be free from the lingering scars of emotional abuse I had endured, both from Lou and her son, I could at last move forward with a renewed sense of peace and closure. Sure, a small part of me felt a fleeting pang of sadness that two once beloved family members had degraded to such wasteful, hateful shells of their former selves, but the overwhelming relief of being free from their reach overrode any residual empathy I could muster. Some relationships simply cannot be salvaged when the rot has burrowed too deep. So I bade my hometown a final farewell, focusing my energy on fostering healthier connections and continuing to thrive out in New York. My Uncle Lenny's passing had been yet another harsh life lesson, but also an empowering reminder to cherish your loved ones while they're still around. As for Lou and Tommy, they could busy themselves paying off those alimony fees for the rest of their miserable lives, their perpetual silent penance for the years of trauma they arrogantly wished upon me.